Well, it's May 22nd, 2021, and I'm sitting here with Rulon and Marlene Hillam, my mom and dad, and we're talking about what Dad refers to as the upper place. So we're sitting at the farm in Marysville and talking about this beautiful farm that George Marvin Hillam acquired. He first started renting in 1926, and which is where Dad did most of his growing up, and his sisters did most or all of their growing up. And we looked at a picture a few minutes ago that shows Grandpa closing the door to their new garage there in that place. And I have memories of that place as a kid and seeing nothing but the house. And I remember the layout of the house. And Dad has told stories about how he slept outside for a lot of his life from that 3-room house. And that's what I remember of it. And I remember being there the day that it was torn down as well. And I asked Dad if he could draw a map of this place because he has a vivid mental picture of the place that he grew up in, and it's quite a campus. So we're going to talk for a few minutes about the layout of the Marvin and Laura Hillam farm that was first rented in 1926 and was then purchased in 1940. Does that sound about right, Dad?
I think so. I'm still looking.
For the dates?
Mm-hmm. Here is a, let's see. Now this is when we bought this farm, not that upper one. And this is the 23rd of March, 1944. So it was in 44 that we bought this house. In fact, we moved down here on the 6th of June, which was the day of the big invasion in Europe.
Wow.
That was D-Day in Europe when they moved down here.
Wow. So
that was D-Day that we come down here.
D-Day.
That was D-Day.
And you weren't home. They moved while you were gone on some kind of was it a scout activity? Or?
It was an Aaronic priesthood outing that went over to Pincox, or Green Canyon now, to a beautiful swimming pool. And we had a picnic there and spent the whole day there. Anyway, they never told me one word about the fact that they had bought this place or that they were going to move. So when I got home that night, I don't remember how I got up here, but they brought me up here instead of going up there, which I thought was rather strange. Anyway, then they finally said, "Oh yeah, we moved today." You moved without me? Well, all I had at the upper place.
Big of a deal.
All of my things were in the bottom drawer of the washstand that was right by the door as we come in the house at the other place. That bottom drawer, the washstand, was mine, and I had all those clothes that I had, which was zero, and hangers behind the door where they hung their overcoats and so forth was where I hung my overalls, and that's basically about all I had. So I didn't have anything to move in the first place, but a few toys and things. But Blair didn't go on the outing for some reason, because he couldn't swim, I guess. Anyway, he helped him move, and he told me often about what a great time he had
Helping him move?
helping him move. Yeah,
Was he kind enough to move your worldly possessions?
yeah, yeah. Anyway, that's how we got down there. When we got down here into this house, they told me that room right behind the kitchen was going to be my room, and in there was a bed and a great big dresser, and that's all. And I didn't want that big dresser. I didn't have anything to put in the dresser. So I was really upset about the fact that they made me leave that big dresser in there, but it was a beautiful big dresser, hardwood, a nice dresser that Grandma and Grandpa had left because they didn't have room for it in their house. Anyway, I had that dresser until Dad went to Rexburg one day and bought a cardboard closet that he came home and put together in that bedroom so I would have a place to hang my clothes. Anyway, that's all I had in there was a 3/4 size bed and that dresser and that little closet, and that's the closet that's downstairs in the basement here.
Has a little horse on it, if I remember right.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that was the beginning of life here, and so in '44, I would have been 13 years old because I was born in '31. So I was in the Deacon's Quorum at that time. But I guess they thought it would be more important for me to go to that running priesthood outing than it was to stay home and help them move.
Wow, so
But
that was...
we didn't have a lot of stuff. We just had that 3-roomed house. And so we just flat didn't have a lot of stuff to move, I guess. And they moved it all on our trailer and Norman's trailer and Grandpa's trailer. So it really didn't take very long to do.
So they Grandma and Grandpa lived in that home from 1926 to 1944. So roughly 18 years.
Yes.
And that was... So that would mean that Nina and maybe Grace would have graduated from high school while living in that home.
Yes. Nina for sure. I'm not sure about Grace.
And so Grandpa was able to finally acquire this from the party that he was renting it from. And by this, we don't just mean the home, but we mean that whole 80-acre piece.
Yes.
And then it's just 4 years after acquiring that, he has the opportunity to acquire this.
Yes.
And that's because Grandpa Abraham Hillam elected to move into Ashton and sell it. Is that?
That's true. Now, Grandpa was sick a lot, and he didn't say much about it, so nobody knew that he was very sick because he didn't complain, but he had stomach cancer. And so that's why he quit the farm and decided to sell it to Dad. And looking at this book I just passed, this is the house that they bought out there.
On that occasion when they went to Ashton.
Yes. And right here somewhere there was a copy of a check that my dad wrote to the hospital in Salt Lake where Grandpa died. And Dad paid the whole thing off, and it was $230. And he had been in that hospital for a couple of weeks.
Wow.
Dad went down there with him, and Gordon went. And Gordon had to come home because he had to work. But Dad stayed with him until he died. And just before he died, he apologized to Dad for charging him so much for this place and making him go in debt for it. And when Dad bought the place, he owed Grandpa, I think it was $12,000.
Huh.
Anyway, here's the check. Now this is the $2,500 he paid him down on the 23rd of March of 44.
Uh-huh.
He paid $2,500 down, and then later he paid him $12,000 for it. But before he died, he apologized and said he was sorry that he put him in debt like that, and he knew that he would never live long enough, the dad would never live long enough to pay that out.
Oh.
Because there just wasn't that much money in farming at that time.
Uh-huh.
And Dad told him, well, you haven't looked at your bank account lately, or you'd know that that money is in the bank. I paid that off, and I don't owe you anything. And I paid that $12,000 off, and that's in your bank account. And he said Grandpa was just tickled to death because he didn't want to die thinking that he had left that son in debt like that.
Huh.
Anyway, that's how it happened.
Wow, that's quite a story. How did he do that? He must have saved that for the whole time he was working at the upper place.
Yes, he did. He did.
So he managed to pay the upper place off in full, and then he managed to have enough to buy his father out
4 years later.
4 years later.
Yeah,
And now he's got a farm of 160 acres.
that's right.
What did he express any conflict over having two complete homes and barns and corrals? And because once you came up here in 1944, there are literally two homes.
That's right. But the home up there had no running water in it. And that was why they really liked this place.
Uh-huh.
Because we actually had running water here and a bathroom in the house. And
It's a bit of an upgrade.
it was a mighty big upgrade for us, you bet. So my dad always said that the greatest compliment that he was ever given was given by his daughter Lola when she told him, or told somebody in his presence, that she never knew that we were poor when we were growing up.
Uh-huh.
Because everybody was poor.
Uh-huh.
It was during the Depression. Nobody had any money, and nobody had any luxurious things at all.
Uh-huh.
And we just used what tools we had, and the only transportation we had was the horses and the wagons. So we didn't need we didn't need an awful lot.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't have an awful lot. But we saved, and he was pretty wise with his money.
Huh.
But he had that much money that he saved.
Huh. That's pretty amazing.
That's right.
Could we look at this map you drew, Dad, and talk through it?
Okay.
Is this what you're calling the map?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'd love to have you talk through what we see here, because it's probably true of all of my siblings and cousins as well, that all we would remember of that upper place is the home. Yeah. I remember the home, I remember an outhouse, I remember a chicken coop, and I remember roughly where the pump was, and that's about it.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us what it is that you've drawn here?
Well, that was probably the most important things, is a well and the outhouse. There was a back side on that house that they, I don't remember. It must have been there when we moved there.
So we can see a little projection on the west side
Yes,
of the house there.
There was a little porch there. There was a room that was nearly the half of the room, half of the width of the house,
Oh,
or length of the house.
Mm.
So we did have that extra room out there, and that was used as a washroom and somewhat of a bathroom, because that's where my parents and sisters and so forth used to take a bath when they were on Saturday night. It was back in that little extra room. They had a luxury of having the tub in there instead out in the kitchen where I had to take a bath. But at that time, they would my mother would hang a blanket up in front of the stove, and the tub set right by the end of the stove, by the wood box, and all us kids would wash, and usually, unless somebody was really dirty, we washed in the same water. The young ones and the older girls would wash in that other room.
They got the good one.
They got the good one.
Huh. Oh, that's amazing.
Anyway, it was an interesting time, but...
So did they heat the water on that stove then, and then
Yes,
pour it into a big tub?
The water was heated on that stove, and Mother would pour it in there for me, and then she'd leave or go do something while I was taking a bath there behind that curtain.
Did they have a big tea kettle? There used to be one up here somewhere. I don't know who got that.
A what?
It was kind of like a big tea kettle. Did they keep that on the stove to keep the hot water in?
Uh-huh.
I wonder where that went.
They sure did. It was always a tea kettle on the stove.
Let's do some orienting here. So at the bottom of this map that you've drawn, we see the word roadway, and that's probably 3700 east.
That'd be 3800. This is 37 down here.
Okay.
So that's 3800
3800 east. And then to the right of that, you have a north symbol and an arrow, and it says Two Rivers. So that helps to orient you. And I've got lots of memories of going down to the spring that way. And, of course, the Egberts is right across the street there, just to the north just a bit and up the street.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's the house, and there's so many memories surrounding this house. But I'd just like to point out that you've even drawn where there were rose bushes, poplar trees out to the east of the house, and then a large garden to the south, an orchard to the west of that garden, and then a lot of pasture land.
Mm-hmm.
And did you tell me last night this pasture, as you're looking to the west, went all the way to this kind of the second rise in the...
Mm-hmm. No, that went to the top of that hill, the second hill.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
I know that hill well. I've tromped over it many times as a kid. And so we're looking at this 80-acre piece, and then at the top of this you've written Grandpa Hillam Farm, and by that you mean that was Abraham Baron Hillam's farm, the one that we now
and there
sit
was
in
a
this
canal that run across there that divided the 280s.
The one that we lost just a few years ago when the main line went to aluminum and they took that ditch out, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That was and so that was there back then as well.
Yes.
So there's kind of our eastern boundary that we can see on the bottom of the page, and we can see the western boundary on the top of the page. And
but the garage picture that we just looked at was right here. Oh, excuse me. It was right here.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just about straight north to the barn, which we saw in the picture.
So you can tell from this map where Grace would have been standing when she took that picture. Would have been about right there.
Yeah.
And you could see that.
Yeah, and you could see that fence just a little bit, and there was a little ditch of water that went right down through here. And that's when I had that unfortunate accident with Wanda. One year for Christmas, when I must have been about 10 or 11, I got a BB gun, but they would not let me have any BBs to shoot it. But I learned pretty soon that I could find little teeny rocks that were about the same size. They did a pretty good job. And one day I was walking out here by the wood pile, which was behind the garage.
To the
and
west.
as I looked over there was Vonda over by the chicken coop, and she was all bent over picking up a bunch of eggs, putting them in a basket. And she had on a pair of striped overalls, and a good-sized rear end was just all I could see. And I just happened to have a little rock in that BB gun, and so I shot her in the hind end. And she let out a scream and come running to catch me, and I just doubled over laughing because it was so funny, because she had jumped so high and turned around and she caught me within a few feet and grabbed that gun and tried to wrap the barrel around my neck, tried to break my neck. Anyway, I was laughing so hard I couldn't defend myself very well, and she just wailed the dickens out of me for a while and cussed me up for shooting her, and it was just really kind of an impulsive accident, I think you'd have to call it. Anyway, we got along really good most of the time. I spent most of my grown-up time with that wood box or that wood pile right behind the barn or the garage.
Just west of the garage.
The reason for that was my job was to keep the wood box full of wood day and night behind the stove. And we had logs. We hauled logs from across the river, and I kept them right there. Sometimes there would be a guy in town who would come out in the fall and cut them with a saw that he had on the back of a trailer that he had built that had a motor on it.
Oh.
And so he had this great big saw that he'd cut those off into blocks of wood, and that was just wonderful. But when we run out of those blocks of wood, and it was usually in the wintertime, then I had to shovel off that pile of wood and lay the log up on top of a sawhorse and saw it before I split it and took it in the house for kindling or for wood to burn. So that kept me out of trouble a lot. And then any time I would get in trouble, they would send me out either to pack water from the well or to go cut some more wood. So that's why I say I spent most of my life at that wood pile or in a pumping the well. And at that time, the well didn't have any motor on it for the to run it up and down, but we did have a windmill there, so if the wind was blowing hard enough, that would pump the water, and we kept the water trough full, and it was a great big round wooden trough that the cows drank out of and the horses. But when the wind wasn't blowing, we had to pump that by hand and keep that full for the cows. And those old milk cows, they acted like they'd drink 50 gallons a day, and that would take a long, long time.
So that was your second hobby after the woodpile.
That's right.
But on a non-windy day, it was your first.
That's right. But we learned early not to put our tongue on that pump handle that was frozen because it would stick. And boy, we got in trouble. Ooh, that was mean to try to get your tongue off that without tearing all the skin off from it.
Oh boy.
But so I say we learned that pretty early, not to try to bite on the pump handle when it was frosty.
You're using the pronoun we.
Well, that was my sisters. But they were always trying to get me into trouble.
So they
Marg and Lola especially.
might have encouraged you to put your tongue on that handle at some point.
Well, that's exactly what happened when I got in trouble. They encouraged me to try to lick that try to lick the frost off the pump handle so it would pump easier. And like a dumbbell, I did it. Anyway, I found out that wasn't a good idea, but those old milk cows drank a lot of water, and the horses drank a lot of water, and at that time we had probably 5 or 6 horses up there.
Oh.
And so they took a lot of water. So the well was really the focal point of our whole life, because we had to have water, and the animals all had to have water. So no matter what else happened, whether it was Sunday or Christmas or anything else, those animals had to be fed and taken care of.
Uh-huh.
So it was a big job. And they were awful glad to have some slave labor when I grew up, where I was old enough that I could do some of that.
But is this where you lived when you told that story about one of them? Oh, you were, I can't remember if you were on a horse or something, but you went over the fence, or
Oh, they ran away with me.
was
Yeah,
that? I've always pictured it being up here, but it must have been
it was up there.
there.
But we had one of the workhorses had a colt. That was really a nice looking, smaller horse. He wasn't fully grown, but I had worked with him since he was as little as I could. When he was really little, I taught him to lead and one thing and another, but when he got old enough to break, my dad wanted him to have one of the neighbors break him. Well, one day when they were gone, I decided I would start the project. So I got him over here by the barn, put the saddle on him, and led her out the gate right here by the well, and started riding her down the road. And we got clear over here by Perry's, and something spooked that horse, and she turned around and started to run home, and I couldn't stop her. I was pulling back on the lines as hard as I could pull, and the harder I pulled, the harder she chomped down on that bit and ran. And she was young and fast, and I started to yell, and Mark and Lola were out here somewhere, and Mark seen me coming and knew what was going to happen because that gate was closed, so she started running for the well to open the gate, and she didn't get quite there. When that horse got there and turned into that gate, and the gate was closed, so she just skidded to a stop, and I went right over her head, over the fence, and landed by that water trough by a great big rock.
Oh.
And if I'd hit that rock, it would have killed me, and they all felt bad about that. Anyway.
That you survived?
I survived. Anyway, that was my first experience breaking horses.
Wow.
Almost broke my neck.
Wow.
But then later on, one of Jack's dudes that came back bought that horse and broke her, and she was really a nice horse. We have a beautiful picture of him up there with that horse, and his nice saddle and bridle and everything on. Eddie Seidman was his name, and he kind of had a love affair going with Grace there that summer. Anyway, and when my horse, a horse named Babe, we had a team of horses named Pet and Babe. And old Pet had a colt that we named Babe. And I did the same thing with her. I started putting the saddle on her when she was just little, and I finally broke her, but she never did run away with me, because by that time I knew the first thing you had to teach him was to stop when you said whoa, and pull back on the reins. And anyway, I had taught her that, and so she grew up to be a nice big workhorse later. It was one of Dad's last workhorses. But she was also a good riding horse. She was actually a Morgan horse, and they were just very versatile and good for saddle horses as well as workhorses.
You mentioned this barn and how it had horses and cows on the east side.
Yes.
But what was on the west side of that barn?
That was where the storage area was for hay.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So hay was stored there. So alfalfa was part of that 80-degree piece,
Yes.
or 80-acre piece.
Mhm.
And do I see 2 granaries here?
Yes. Yeah, there were 2 granaries, and this one was kind of a storage room. We had a lot of tools and stuff in the first little room in that.
Uh-huh.
But then there was a room back off to the back here that was always full of grain, and usually it was oats.
Oh.
And so, because we fed a lot of oats to the horses.
Uh-huh.
So oats were in a big demand. And then in about 1940-something, we built this granary, and Grandpa helped build that. And when we moved down here, that was one of the first things they moved. They jacked that up and put some great big poles underneath it,
Uh-huh.
and hooked onto it with 2 teams of horses, and pulled that right down through the field and put it right there by where it is today. Now it's the bunkhouse, but that's where that came from.
Amazing. So that's where the bunkhouse, what is known today as the bunkhouse, came from.
Yep.
It was used as a granary for many years and when those corrugated round ones were added, did they take its place entirely as a granary?
Not entirely, because many years we had to store everything we raised. The elevators would be full and there wasn't room to put them.
I see.
So
And
in
that's
that
why
case-
there's granaries down by the cellar too,
Uh-huh. Yeah,
or were.
there were. We just had to buy cellars, whatever we could get to put grain in. But at the time, we didn't have augers, so the only way to load or unload a trailer load of grain was with a shovel, a big scoop shovel, and that's how we had to do it. Boy, that was a lot of work.
That's a
My
lot
word.
of work. Wow.
That was a lot of work.
Wow, that's pretty neat to see that. And that was, you estimate, around 1940
Mm-hmm.
when that granary was built.
Mm-hmm.
So probably around the same time that the new garage was built.
Yes, like, because it was made out of the same kind of lumber.
That tongue and groove
Uh-huh.
type.
But I remember specifically when they were working on that, when I come home from school one day, and it was near Thanksgiving, and they had been talking to us about everybody who had a turkey for Thanksgiving. So I went out there and made a passionate plea for my dad to let Mother buy a turkey for Thanksgiving. And he informed me that we did not have the money to buy a turkey, that we would be very lucky if we could eat an old hen. And so that's how our Thanksgiving went. But I remember I was really feeling bad because I thought I ought to be able to have a turkey for Thanksgiving, but we didn't have a turkey for Thanksgiving. But when that garage or that granary was built, when it wasn't full of wheat, that was my bedroom. I had an old army cot that I kept out there in the back corner.
of that granary?
Uh-huh. And I slept out there a lot.
Oh.
But my mother and dad didn't like that very well because I could lock that door from the inside because I had a little lock on the inside.
Uh-huh.
And they couldn't get at me. So finally my mother convinced me that I had to be able to open that door so she could come in and wake me up. And so I ran a string with a couple of 3 pulleys. I ran a big string from my bed or from that cot up to the ceiling and across the top of the rafters and then down to that little hook. So I could just yank on that and undo that door so Mom could get in. Anyway, kept the girls out, but it sure didn't keep Mom out.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, I remember that granary when it was still laid out as a granary, having maybe the back quarter of it or so had a partition and you'd go inside of there, and there was grain in there then. Is that the portion that you slept in?
Yes. Yeah, that's where it was. But if you remember right, on each one of the bins, there was a sliding door in the front, and we would take out bin boards as we used the grain.
I do remember those.
And so it was fairly accessible most of the time.
Boy, that's amazing. So when you weren't sleeping there, you still weren't sleeping in the house, generally, right?
That's right.
Instead, you were sleeping outside on the south of the house against the south wall.
That's right.
Can you talk about your sleeping arrangements there?
Well, there was a big rose bush right at the corner of the house, and my cot was an old army cot that we got from Jack Young.
Oh.
And it was right in that corner by the house. And Dad had several heavy canvas that that Gordon had got from the railroad or somebody shipping something that he would bring up to us. So I always had one of those canvas tarps that was over the top of my cot. And so I slept out there when it rained or whatever. That was just where I slept.
Did you have it draped over like a blanket over the cot, or did you have it propped like a shelter?
It was just draped over my cot.
I see.
Yeah. Anyway, and I was sleeping out there one night when it was raining and the lightning hit the pole that had an antenna just like the one I got out under the house up here. But that antenna went out behind the playhouse. There was a pole.
Which you can see just to the south of the house, the playhouse there by the apple trees.
Yeah. And I saw the lightning come across that, a big flash of light that lightning followed that in. But right on the outside of the window was what was called a lightning arrestor, which was a ground. And that lightning went right down that. And as a result, it didn't burn the house down. Well, normally that's how a house got burned down, was a stroke of lightning or something. It would start them on fire.
Boy.
But because we had that radio and had the ground that was grounded, the lightning was diverted and went right down that, but that was within 2 feet of my head. And by the time it got that far, I was way to the bottom of that pile of covers.
So far we've covered 3 near-death experiences, one with your sister Lola, one with getting bucked off of an unbroken horse and almost hitting your head on a rock, and now the third is almost getting struck by lightning.
That's right. And there was another that occurred about that time after the war was over. In the fields of the upper 80, there were several rock patches that had great big boulders. They were about the size of that overstuffed chair right there.
And this is the upper 80 that we're talking about here.
Yes.
Right, so...
And so when Vic Phillips got back from the service, he had been a demolition expert and knew how to use dynamite. So Dad would hire him to come and he would bring a bar that was about 1 inch in diameter and about 6 feet long, and he'd get down underneath that and poke a hole in that, and then he'd put a couple of sticks of dynamite down there, and then we'd get way back, and he had a wire in his hand with a battery, and he would touch that battery, and it would touch that dynamite off, and just blast that thing out of the ground.
Oh, wow.
But the trick to blast them was to have the dynamite enclosed in a cap, and that cap was just like a great big firecracker. Anyway, it was my job to carry those in my pocket right there. And we were just east of where the Noel is here one day shooting a big rock, and the thing splintered, and a piece about the size of my hand come zipping round and hit me right underneath that shirt and cut a big hole in my shirt just above my belt.
Oh.
If it had been 1 inch higher, all those caps would have detonated and would have killed me right on the spot.
Oh, wow.
Anyway,
So just right under your pocket.
Yeah,
So blasting caps.
they were blasting caps. Anyway, so I had several things like that my guardian angel was on right on the top of.
So that's the fourth near-death experience.
Oh, yeah, they were nearly daily. Anyway, we worked really hard to get those rocks, and we would haul them with the horses or the tractor, whichever at that time, and put them in the canal to stop the water from running so fast.
Oh. Oh, so you dam up the water a little bit with them. Amazing. Could you talk a little bit about the garden here that's to the south of the house? There's an orchard, a playhouse, and then a raspberry patch / garden. Was that there from the very beginning?
The raspberry patch took up most of the garden, but we did raise some things there because there was a ditch that ran right there.
Oh.
There was a ditch of water that come across the road right here, just straight across the road from Gerald's dad's place, and run right by there. So that was how we watered it. But the raspberries composed a large share of our fruit that we raised. Because we raised a lot of raspberries. We never thought of selling them because they were too valuable. But they always ended up down in this cellar out behind the house, bottled it. Mother would bottle them for us.
I see. So we can see this cellar right immediately to the west of the house.
Yes.
Was there much of that above the ground? Or was it
quite a bit. It made quite a mound there above the ground, the ceiling, and there was a set of stairs that Dad had built that you opened the door that was flat on the ground, and you opened that door and then walked down the cellar and the one side of it had the shelves in where all of our fruit was stored. The other side had just sacks of potatoes in it that we carried down there for the winter.
Oh, wow.
So we had a lot of food that was down there, and that's where we kept our spare food.
I see. What else that must have been a pretty good sized garden.
Yes, it was. It was pretty good size. One specific thing I remember about that garden was one day my dad come in the house, and me and the girls were sitting there. Somebody had given us some gum, and we were sitting around there chewing that gum, and it just irritated the life out of him to see us smacking that gum with our mouths open like a bunch of cows. And he reminded us that that's exactly what it looked like, and he did not like it. So he said, if you want to smack that damn gum, just go out and stick your head in that raspberry patch and smack it all you want. So we went out there, and there was actually bubble gum that we were working on. It was really fun. So we went out there and we had more fun that afternoon, blowing bubbles and hiding in that corn from Dad.
In the raspberry patch?
The raspberry patch.
That's
Anyway,
amazing.
then we had another garden. It was over here by the barn, and there was another ditch of water that come right straight down here, and went over by that ditch, and or over by the barn, and that's why we had the garden right there. But
It was a convenient place to put one and to divert water into.
yeah, it was. It was a good little garden.
What did you grow in that one?
Mostly corn, beans, carrots, radishes, potatoes. Just about everything we could eat, because we ate out of those gardens all the time. That's all we had. We very seldom went to town. We didn't have any money to go with in the first place. So, but us kids never had such a thing as some money that they would give us each week. What's
Allowance.
Allowance?
An allowance, yeah. We never had an allowance. If we had any money at all, we would have to talk Mother out of it. She had it, and Dad was always out in the field or gone, and so Mother was kind of the local banker, and she'd give us a quarter or something once in a while when we needed it. But it wasn't very often we needed it. We didn't have any place to spend it other than Mertz down in Marysville. We didn't get down there very often, so.
I'm trying to imagine where you would hang a carcass and keep some meat with this layout. If you butchered a cow or if you got a deer, how did you deal with that?
We either dried it and made jerky, or Mother bottled it.
Oh.
Mostly it was Mother bottling it. But she knew how to put up sausage from the pigs. And we very seldom had beef at that time. We very seldom had beef.
Oh.
But we had a lot of pigs.
Where were the pigs?
Well, that's a good question. There was a pig pen. We always had a pig pen.
Oh.
Let's see, where was the pig pen? That was close. Oh, it was right there between the chicken coop and that greenery.
Oh.
That's where there's a pig pen, and there was a high fence around it. It was right in that corner. And then in the summertime, we had movable panels that we would take out in this area in the pasture and move them around from place to place.
I see.
But all of our surplus milk, especially the skim milk, all went to the pigs.
Oh.
Every bit of milk we had went through the separator and separated the cream, and the cream was our cash crop, and that's what we would accumulate, and Mother would make butter and ice cream or whatever with milk product.
Cottage cheese, did she make that?
She'd make a lot of cottage cheese. So every bit of it was used that we could, but the rest of it was packed in buckets out to the field and dumped in a wooden trough for the pigs.
I see. So it wasn't common for you to butcher a cow and to eat beef.
It was?
It wasn't common for you to eat beef.
It wasn't common because we could sell them, and they needed the money more than they needed the meat. So we didn't eat a lot of meat that way, but the meat we did eat was a lot of stuff that we had killed. We ate a lot of wild chickens, a lot of grouse. We ate a lot of, when I grew up and was old enough to hunt, we had a lot of meat that was deer meat or elk meat. One time we had a calf moose.
Oh, wow.
So we just got by with whatever we had, but we didn't eat a lot of beef. Now it's fashionable to kill a beef and put them in the freezer and eat him, but at that time they were too valuable as a sale product.
I see.
Did you have many fish? Did you go?
We did eat a few fish. My dad was always too busy to go fishing. Mother took me fishing when I first went over here and learned how to fish a little bit, but I didn't learn very good until one night I was down there when Ern Whittle come down, and he waded right in to the side of me and looked at what I was doing and told me what I was doing wrong, and tied a few flies on for me. And that was fairly impressive because he had lost his arm from about here on down in a thrashing machine when he was young. So he had a leather covering on his arm right here, and but he tied on some flies for me and showed me how to fish with flies, and then I started catching fish and started knowing how to catch them. And then over the years I learned about how to use worms mostly, and so I supplied an awful lot of food for the table with getting fish, as many as I could get.
That always made everybody happy, I'm guessing, when you...
Yeah, they liked that. Yeah, the spring was good, and in the springtime we would always go to the river and gather watercress on the creeks that dumped into the river. And that was a big thing for us until we found out that a lot of it was contaminated and we couldn't eat it.
With Giardia or something of that sort? Oh.
Anyway, that we just ate what we could get. But I remember one time I went hunting with Alden down by ZJ's place where there was a creek. We walked up that creek one morning and jumped a couple of big mallards that jumped up and started to fly away from us. Alden had a shotgun, and he shot and missed, and I had a .22, and I just shot one of those big mallards as it flew away. And
wow.
And I didn't destroy very much meat, so my dad told me that any time I would bring one of those home that he would pay me 50 cents for it.
Oh.
So I tried really hard to go get a lot of ducks after that, and I did shoot quite a few with my .22.
Wow. In flight? Sometimes.
I was in flight sometimes. I did. I was really lucky.
So that's not easy.
But Alden then showed up one day with a little .22 Ithaca double-barrel 20 gauge, and for some reason that just fit me, and I could shoot really good with that.
Oh.
When on a mission, he traded that off for somebody, and I sure felt bad.
Oh, wow.
That he missed that.
You have a pole bridge. Is that what that says? Pole
Yes.
bridge in front of the driveway?
That pole bridge crossed that little ditch that was right there.
Mm-hmm.
And somewhere in my things I have a copy when I was just probably 10 years old or so, nailing some new logs on that thing, because that was another one of my jobs, was to see that bridge was covered with logs or poles. So that was a major job to get me out of the house and to keep me busy.
Wow.
Well, my dad was really a good administrator, and he knew how to give jobs. Anytime there was the least hint of any trouble or anybody starting to argue or anything, they would just get a job to go pack water or go split wood or go down the cellar and get some fruit or whatever. It was kind of a magical thing that he pulled on us that way.
To keep everybody busy, huh?
Yeah.
And Gerald was just across the street, essentially.
Yes.
So was that could have been a cause for upset when you came back from that activity in 1944 and discovered that you no longer lived across the street from Gerald?